Well, folks, welcome to one more edition of Politics and Random. Berto Willis, your host. Thank you so kindly for being a part of the show. We are going to have a great show for you today. As usual, I should say. Well, folks, today, first of all, we're coming to you instead of at 4 megabit or 4, what is it? Instead of coming to you at 4 megabits, we're coming to you at 1.25 megabits because, as it turns out, we are still having ATL check-in. Paul Fleming, welcome aboard, my brother. Welcome aboard. We're still having all kinds of internet problems. Let me tell you, I'm going to call them out. Suddenlink in Kingwood, Texas. Suddenlink in Tyler, Texas. The service is horrendous, and they lie to you as soon as they tell you that they're going to have repair people out there. They come out, but guess what? Nothing changes. They're continuing to sell. It seems like they're continuing to sell, and the service continues to degrade. They're affecting all of us that are doing good work. Anyhow, we're going to have a great show for you today, my brothers and my sisters. The title of the show today is Former Charlotte, North Carolina Mayor Discusses Implementing Progressive Policies and More. And of course, before we get started, we're going to talk about COVID-19 economic update. And at the end of the program, I'm going to answer any questions, whatever you have in the chat room. Remember, if you are on YouTube, meaning at youtube.com/Egberto Willies, or if you are on Facebook, specifically on the Facebook page for the program, not where it's all shared, but on the program, if you go to facebook.com/politics done right, we will be able to see all of those on this one big screen. We don't have anything else open because we don't have the throughput for that at this point in time, but we are going to have a great show. Anyhow, Jennifer Roberts, former Charlotte, North Carolina mayor, discusses implementing progressive policies, ensuring all ideologies feel included. COVID-19 and economy, of course, is what we start with. Jennifer Roberts' tenure as Charlotte, North Carolina mayor was one of action. The Charlotte mayor was very concerned about housing and executed one of the most successful programs in the country. You see, she looks at problems as problems and not as political footballs. She knows that while progressive policies help all, it takes respect and acceptance to get them into fruition, even in Charlotte. Anyhow, I want to go ahead and start out with this morning. This morning, Rick Bright, the director at one of the subdivisions, and I guess it's a part of CDC, Marda, I think it's called, a part or something. Barda, I think is what it's called. He was on Capitol Hill, and he said something that many of us have been saying and talking about for quite a long time, and I want you to check this out because it is important that we see this. Check this out, and then we'll take it on the other side.
I believe Americans need to be told the truth. I believe that the best scientific guidance and advice was not being conveyed to the American public during that time. I believe by not telling America the truth or being fully transparent, regardless of where the information was coming from, people were not as prepared as they could have been and should have been. We did not forewarn people, we did not train people, we did not educate them on social distancing and wearing a mask as we should have in January and February. All of those forewarnings and all those educational opportunities for the American public could have had an impact on further slowing this outbreak.
I think that's prescient, that's damning, because we all know the president just thought he could wish the coronavirus away. We all knew that. Those of us in the know, we weren't just listening. But you know what is ironic? Yesterday, I put out that piece that I showed you guys yesterday. Well, did I put that piece? Oh, I didn't put the piece out. The next piece that I'm going to show you is of a doctor at MSNBC. He's one of their advisors, one of their on-air advisors on how to deal with infectious diseases, etc., etc., etc. And he was on, and when he came on, he had a lot to say about, okay, you have to be careful, etc. But I went ahead and placed it on YouTube. And what was ironic is there is a MAGA guy comes on and he just says, fake news, fake news. We see what's happening in Wisconsin. We see in Wisconsin they've gone ahead and the Supreme Court has overturned the governor's order to keep things closed, to keep people in their homes as much as possible. They've overturned that. And yesterday, several bars out there in Wisconsin, different parts of Wisconsin. I don't think Madison. Madison is a progressive city in Wisconsin. I've been there several times. These places open, and they were full, and people were without masks, and people weren't doing any social distancing, and they're talking as if they don't care. People are getting, again, I don't necessarily blame those people. When you have two different factions that are supposed to be, no matter what the faction is, supposed to be there to support the people, that you have some people that think what we're talking about is fake news. I'm going to tell you, at first I thought it was crazy. But when I see the amount of money that Trump and those guys are using to create a false narrative, and an effective one at that, what I see is not that my counterparts that just don't see it my way are stupid or foolish or anything like that. I see a well-orchestrated design to corrupt truth. And if you start from a place of, let's say, conservatism, where you think a lot of things we as liberals or progressives do are in an attack of you, it's not hard to see how that can cauterize in people. So I am starting to, look, I hate it. I hate that these people seem so gullible. But if you are not an engineer, if you are not a scientist, where you do things in an analytical format, it's hard not to believe the well-orchestrated design storyline that they give you because it sounds plausible. But anyhow, let me go ahead and play this piece here, and then we'll continue about that. And I'd love to hear from others. Welcome aboard, Bruce. They don't know how to fix it. Only Bob the Builder can do it. Let's hope the travelers are wearing masks. That will slow down. The travelers are the problem is, Bruce, is that airlines are saying going into the plane you have to use a mask. But if you're on the plane and you don't use the mask, they're not going to force you to put it on. So the person next to you is at risk. The person behind you, in front of you, they're putting your lives at risk. So I am not sure. But let me play this and then we'll take it on the other side. Eventually, we all have to go back to work, but let this be a lesson to you. Let me play this and then we'll take it on the other side.
So today we learned a member of our own on-air medical team is sick with the coronavirus. Dr. Joseph Fair, he's a New York-based virologist who you have seen on this broadcast and others. We had Dr. Fair on our broadcast from New York, and I remember it because when he came out during the commercial break, he was the first person I encountered to decline, politely, a handshake. He explained that we had to stop doing that. And turns out he was right. And while he was always careful, now he is sick.
Today, NBC News science contributor Joseph Fair posting the stunning news from his hospital bed that he's got COVID-19.
I'm on the other end of it, but not out of the woods yet.
Fair, a virologist, spent years in Africa studying some of the most deadly viruses known to man, including Ebola. Now the virus hunter believes he was infected with the coronavirus after traveling on a crowded plane 2 weeks ago to New Orleans.
My flights were packed, and I had a mask on, I had gloves on, I did my normal wipes routine, but, obviously you can still get it through your eyes.
Joseph first started noticing symptoms about 3 days after the flight. He lost his appetite, felt nauseous, and developed muscle aches.
About 6 or 7 days into that is probably when my lung infection developed because I started getting really short of breath. I really couldn't take a full breath, and that's when I decided to call 911, a first for me, my first ambulance ride.
At the hospital, he tested negative for COVID 4 separate times. Fair says it's most likely because you waited too long to get the test. The virus levels dropping at this stage of his recovery. He's now being treated with oxygen while his lungs heal. It's a surprising development for someone who's been showing us how to protect ourselves in public places.
Social distancing, using masks, cleaning your hands, not touching your face,
days, and you still got the virus.
I did do all those things. Occasionally you make a mistake, even people like me that do this for a living, but I can't overtly remember one if I did make it.
What's your message to people?
Don't be in a hurry to open up. I know it seems like your life is over, but you know me, John. 42-year-olds. I know we can get through this as a nation, but really, we have to take it seriously.
This is a doctor, a virologist, somebody who's gone to Africa and worked with Ebola and all these other diseases. If he can get it, if he can make the mistakes to get it, it just tells you that unless we have good protocols established, unless we get this virus under control before we really send everybody back to work, we're in trouble. But here's the thing, right? I think all the people in power who are trying to send you back to work, they already know that. They're seeking herd immunity brute force. In other words, they're saying we are willing to sacrifice about 3 to 5% of the population. And when I say sacrifice, I mean sacrifice 3 to 5% of the population, not only in the immediate deaths. Let's say the deaths are only 0.4, 0.5% or whatever, but in the mitigating deaths that's going to happen when you have overflowing emergency rooms, which will cause other deaths for other reasons. There are a lot of things that will occur which has little to do with the coronavirus proper, but with other issues. And that is what they're driving at. They are willing to exchange economic activity for the disruption in the lives of those who are going to get the disease, those who are going to have not the best care. Because remember, if you're wealthy and the emergency rooms are filled up, you don't have to worry about anything because you have your private doctor. You have your system that can take care of you. But it's for those that are dependent on the system of our current screwed up healthcare system. They're the ones that are going to suffer, and we don't know who. And remember, it won't be only deaths by coronavirus, but it will also be deaths because coronavirus has taken so many of our resources that for other things, they just get laid by the side. And again, those things can cause others to die as well. It's not time. We need a structure, and we need leaders who are really working to mitigate this virus. Absolutely so. But I noticed Norman, welcome aboard, Norman, Bruce Pollard, Norman Reynolds, Paul Fleming. Interesting that he tested negative for the virus. What is a test? I guess not an RNA test. Well, the reason why he tested negative is by the time he was tested, he believes his body had already gotten rid of the virus, so the body was on the mend. In other words, what was happening is the body was already recovering, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, remnants of the virus, I don't know if there are tests out there that actually check for the dead virus, or I don't know what the serology is on all of that. But the reason he tested negative is likely because of that. I think some other tests later found that yes, he did have antibodies for the particular virus. But we have to be cognizant of what's going on here. They're making a bet, okay, and I need folks to understand what the administration is doing. Given that this doesn't kill most people. It doesn't kill most people, but it makes people very sick. But there's an additional factor that nobody talks about. Yes, it makes people very sick. We don't know, after they've recovered, what are the repercussions that they're going to have. In other words, they've subsequently found out that clots are a problem. They've subsequently found out that strokes are a problem. They're subsequently finding out that even after you've recovered from these drugs, there are a lot of other things that can happen to you. And in that event, it means that we're changing millions of people's lives, whether they live or not. And in a country that does not provide socialized medicine, meaning Medicare for all or all these others, it means that once you get coronavirus, you will be forever bankrupted, or unless we are successful in getting single payer, Medicare for all, and all these features that we as progressives know we need to have. I tell you what, I'm going to go ahead and let's go ahead and play Jennifer Roberts, the mayor from North Carolina. and then we'll come back and do some more talking. As far as I wanted to do a little bit more talking about the economy. Depending on how many people I see leave messages, I may have some time to do that, but there are some things that have been really bothering me that I want to talk about. But let's go ahead and play Jennifer, and we'll take it on the other side. Welcome to another episode of Politics Done Right. Today, I'm honored to have the former mayor of Charlotte, Jennifer Roberts. As you guys know, mayors are where things happen. And in her case, things happened. Mayor Roberts, how are you doing today?
I am doing great, and I hope that everyone is safe and healthy because we know a lot of people are in tough times right now, and just want to take that minute to recognize all the folks like our healthcare workers who are working so hard to keep us healthy and safe.
Well,
Thank you.
I mean, it's like the mayor doesn't leave you. The concern for the populace in general, that's just within. Thank you for that. First of all, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you really get into politics?
Well, how much time do you have?
Any amount of time.
Well, it's interesting because I really came at politics from being interested in international politics. When I was in undergrad and graduate school, I had the opportunity and the fortune to travel, to spend some time in foreign cultures, and I became fascinated with the way that different cultures interact. And through history, the way that nation states and countries have interacted. I became interested in their policy. I became interested in international treaties and how do those work. What makes the French and Germans different? What has led to the European Union? Europe was actually my focus of study in graduate school. And through that policy lens, I became interested in local politics. Generally for women, it's around an issue. And for me, it was around education because my children entered public school. And I began to see from a parent's eyes what was really happening in public school. And I kept hearing politicians saying the school system was overfunded, there was plenty of money, and I saw something very different on the ground. And I looked around at who was in office and I said, they need to have a mom who understands what's going on with education. And so my first office was a county commissioner because our county commission here in Mecklenburg funds about a third of our schools and has a lot of interaction with the school board on issues of education, on school placement, and support for things like school nurses because the county is also the public health entity. So I ran for county commission and I wanted to have a voice. And that's why I always encourage women who have not traditionally been front and center in the political realm. I always encourage them to run for office because in my studies of political science, what we've seen is that where women have a significant voice, countries around the world and states pay attention to certain issues more, give more resources. And those issues are ones that help all of us. Education, healthcare, climate change, which includes the environment, and housing. And those are good for all of us. But we have seen that women's voices matter, particularly on those issues.
And it's amazing, as you became the mayor of Charlotte, one of your pet projects, I would say, was housing. 5,000 houses that you wanted to get taken care of, built, produced, or however you put it. And you actually have it on schedule. And I understand that it is going to be exceeding your best expectations.
Well, absolutely. What we find in cities across America is that affordable housing is a challenge. Our cities are growing very fast and the real estate values are going up because of the demand. And what this is doing is making it very difficult for many of our workers and residents to afford to live here. And what we firmly believe is that you should be able to afford to live where you work. We know that we have hourly workers who work in our downtown who may have to drive 20 to 30 minutes because it takes that long to find some place they can afford. And that's just not, it's not right. It's also not good for the environment because they're spending that time in a car maybe with emissions. They're also spending time away from family when they have to live that far out. So Charlotte has made great strides, but I have to say we still have a long way to go. And if you look, especially right now, at some of the tents that are being erected under our bridges, I know every city that I've visited in the last year or so, I've seen a lot of folks who are still homeless, and we need to be even better. I am proud of our accomplishments, but I know there is still work to do. So I'm still doing it, just from a different perspective now as a citizen and an activist.
Well, I actually saw a bit of your activism on a Zoom conference where, there's, I formed a part of a group called Coffee Party. And what we did, it's not a party, it's really a group of people trying to get folks to get together and among different political ideologies, talk and try to find where you could actually come together. And I don't hear that a whole lot, especially in a lot of our either the ultra right or the ultra left space. And I saw you in a particular space where I would not have necessarily expected that sort of a framework. And as I listened to you, it sort of brought back memories of the things that we attempted to build. And then that's when I said I really wanted to speak to you and ask you to be a voice to encourage all of us if we are to attain what we need to attain, especially during a pandemic and beyond. We have to be able to come together. So why don't you kind of tell us a little bit about how do you see us all coming together to actually fulfill a need? You fulfilled a need in as a mayor of Charlotte. You saw a distinctive need that it was a distinctive need.
Yes, absolutely. But I also know, after having been in office, how important it is to have your residents support you, how important it is to have small businesses, to have families, to have your hourly workers, as well as your CEOs. You want all those folks to be, to understand what the challenges are, to see the big picture, and to help move that policy forward. Because, I mean, take something like housing. The city of Charlotte does not build houses. It gives permitting, and it does zoning for multifamily versus residential, et cetera. But developers are the ones who are actually producing that housing stock. And so they have to work together. We have to have government and business work together. Same is true on climate change. We know that cities and their operations are only about 5 to 10% of the greenhouse gas emissions. We have to inspire, encourage, incent, and sometimes regulate business to make sure that it's not polluting, that it is heading the right direction toward a clean energy economy, that it is doing everything possible for energy efficiency. And also, in these solutions, there's something that's very important to me, and this is another place we need the people's voice: equity. We absolutely have been a nation that has overlooked people. We know there was systemic racism in the way we built our cities. We know people were redlined out of prosperity. We know that our healthcare is not equal in terms of access or in practice. We know that people of color are not getting the same treatment, not getting the same diagnosis or the same care. We have statistics and facts and figures that show this. And our role as citizens and residents who see this on the ground and firsthand is to let our policymakers know. I always tell people, your stories are so compelling. Tell your story. You have to use your authentic voice from your perspective, whatever your demographic is, whatever your role is, whether it's as a volunteer or a worker or a working mom or a veteran or a retired person. We need your perspective on what you see happening on the ground. That was so helpful for me in putting together policy that was serving everyone. Because one of the things I emphasized when I was in public office is public means everyone. Public means you don't get to turn people away because they have too many challenges. You don't get to turn people away because you don't like the way they look. You are serving everyone. And you have to serve some people who may not agree with you, who may try to, stymie you at every turn, but you are still there to provide them with health care, with safe streets, with security, with clean air, with some of these things, strong education. some of these things that we know are really human rights, especially in a developed country, in a post-industrial society. We absolutely have enough for everyone. We just don't have all the doors open yet in the right way to include everyone. So I always encourage people, be authentic, use your voice, tell your story. And I remember budget decisions that we actually changed, both when I was a commissioner and when I was a mayor, because we heard a personal story that we could understand, that touched us, that showed us the impact of policy and budgets. And your budget is a huge measure of what your policy is. So that makes a difference. I have so many examples of where it makes a difference. And I also know when my colleagues would say things like, well, nobody sent me an email or called me about this, so it must be okay. Like everybody must agree with me. They actually believe that. So if you're not, filling up the phone lines or the email inboxes with your reaction to whatever the policy is, they think you're perfectly fine with it. And it's a lot to keep up with because we have local, state, and federal officials, but we absolutely need our residents to be our eyes and ears. And that's what makes democracy work and makes our communities better.
That is such an important message. That message, I mean, you just gave two messages in my humble opinion. One is you gave a litany of progressive policy, progressive voices, right there, progressive issues, but then also how important engagement is. In other words, we have a lot of people talk a whole lot about uh, the government never does things right. The government not realizing something that we preach all the time. Government is what again? We, the people. And you just said a magical thing. If a politician does not hear from you, that politician believe they're doing what you expect them to do. And therefore, it is imperative that they hear from you. Now, when I heard you, the other thing that I got within that room that I wanted to sort of get out of you is uh, communication is bidirectional. Uh, right now, I think there are forces that try to keep these poles from interacting. It doesn't, while I don't like to create false equivalences, it is true that both sides, however, sort of are anathema to each other. And my thing is, how do we, first of all, you as a person who's willing to engage, how do you open the door, first of all, let's say on the left, to tell them it is okay, not necessarily to turn the cheek, but it is okay to just sometimes listen?
Well, actually, there is research that shows what helps people engage. And one of the things that you do is you start with people, you build rapport. So if you know what your legislator has worked on in the past or what their specific interest is, or maybe you know they have children, and you can say, we're both parents and we both want the best for our kids. And I want to tell you a story about the education my child's receiving, right? So you start with that connection, you start with that rapport. The other thing that people don't do enough is acknowledge and respect a different viewpoint. So when I talk about climate, for example, I will say, I understand not everyone sees this issue the same way. I understand that some people have a challenge with the science, or maybe they're not seeing the impacts in their neighborhood, and so they're confused, or they're not from the same perspective. That I understand that. There's a reason. And what you're doing is you're validating that person's opinion because they're a human being and they've got five senses and they've got their own experience. You're validating that. You're saying it's okay that you and I have different viewpoints. But now I'm going to tell you some good things that you will see, because we share some values, that you will see have a good outcome as well. And what we try to stress are, where are the benefits? So when you talk about housing or climate, a couple of things that actually are connected, and you want to again talk about why it's important for people to be able to live close to where they work. You talk about traffic congestion. You talk about air pollution. You talk about spending time away from family. We all have family values. We all believe that parents should spend time with their children. Well, when you're building housing that is only affordable if it's 30 minutes away, you're challenging a lot of those same values. So we can work on housing together to make those options work for everyone. Same is true of climate. We know that clean energy, first of all, it's cheaper. Like wind and solar, nobody pays to like have the sunshine, right? So
Right.
wind and solar are cheaper. It's been shown, you can look at every graph and every financial institution of where wind and solar prices are versus coal and natural gas and other horrible fossil fuels that are polluting our air, damaging our children's lungs. Did you know that African American children are 4 times as likely to have asthma as white children? It's because they often live near highways. These are the areas that have been redlined that have gone through poor communities. They live near asphalt plants. They live in the more polluted parts of town. It has an impact on their health. And that's another value we all share. We all want to have access to good health. We want to have freedom from chronic illnesses. And some of the things that we do to protect our climate are also protecting our health. So why would you not want to do this? Why would you not want to build a future that's better than the one we have now, better than the world we have now? And when you can do that in a way that has benefits for everyone. One more thing, by the way, right now, if you invest in companies that are sustainable, they actually have performed better than companies that don't have sustainable practices. You can look at its ESG investing, you can look at the graphs, you can go to Forbes, you can go to any of those trusted financial sources, and companies that are doing good in the community are also doing well in the stock market. So again, you want to focus on co-benefits, on things that are positive. And you know what? Sometimes it takes a little change to get to that point because we have infrastructure we've built based on the old ways, based on fossil fuels, based on housing that is 1 acre lots. Well, if you're a growing community, you can't have a bunch of 1 acre lots
Nah.
because you're going to end up taking up the whole state, right? And no one can get anywhere. So there are a lot of things that have to change, but that change can be directed in a good way that benefits everyone. And it's going to
Great.
be a little disruptive.
Great segue into business. A lot of people think that if you stand for progressive values, that if you stand for these having a good social safety net, that somehow you are anti-business. I have a tenet, first of all, that you decide what social values you cherish, and then you build businesses around what your core values are. That's what I believe. It's not the other way around. You don't build business and then try to get. So I mean, I think having you speak about uh, business as you just did, if you're environmentally honest, if you are socially responsible, that leads to good business as well.
Absolutely. And treating your employees well makes a big difference because, first of all, you don't want them grumbling about you when they get off work, especially if you're a retail company that has a brand that wants to be recognized as caring about people. So you don't want your employees grumbling. You don't want them to not have health care because, as we've seen in this pandemic, we're only as strong as the most vulnerable in our system. So the fact that we have people who are, working in meat processing plants that don't have protective equipment, that are working in very unhealthy, dirty conditions, that impacts all of us because that spreads disease. And that is a
Now,
decision made by an employer. Yeah.
absolutely. Now, uh, we're coming up on time here, so I have a specific question about you. I met you on a
Okay.
emergency COVID uh, platform. In other words, we're trying to figure out exactly how best are we going to reinstitute a country after COVID-19. It's going to look quite a bit different than it does right now. What does America in 2021 look like to you?
So America in 2021, I do think we're at a tipping point. And I think that depending on how much people engage and care and understand, we could go either way. So the tipping point is we could fall into autocracy where we have increased gap between rich and poor, between opportunity and lack of opportunity, or we could fall into it's time to rebuild better. It's time to come out of a recession, which we know we're going into, in a way that creates jobs for a sustainable 21st century economy, which means clean energy, smart energy grids, broadband access in rural areas as well as cities. It means an economy that works for everyone, and it means transportation that is efficient but also fossil fuel free. And there are ways that we can have a green stimulus, which will actually create new opportunities for a healthier future for all. And so if we elect people in 2020, in November, who have the long-term vision in mind, who are thinking about their children and their grandchildren, we know that they're going to care about how we rebuild and how we rebuild in an equitable fashion so we don't have revolution. Because if that separation between rich and poor is too great and too evident and leads to more misery, this country is going to have even worse problems than we have now. I truly believe that we have the opportunity. Somebody said, don't ever miss the opportunity that a crisis presents. And we have an opportunity to rebuild better and stronger and more equitably. But it's going to take people speaking up and showing they care about that equity, that everybody matters and everybody can play a role in making a better future. That's what it's going to take. I'm hopeful. Humans are incredibly resilient, and I'm hopeful we're going to get through this. We're going to see that we're all connected, and we're going to use that to make a better tomorrow.
That has been a tenet of politics done right for some time. We have to make what I always tell our people as well is we have to use the sacrifice of now 82,000 lives. We can't come back the way we were. They will be our heroes going forward. Mayor Jennifer Roberts, thank you so kindly for having been on Politics Done Right with people like you, with you on the team. I am absolutely sure we will get what we need to get done. Thank you so kindly.
Thank you so much for having me, and the best to all your listeners.
All right, folks, I hope you enjoyed that. That was Jennifer Roberts, former mayor of Charlotte, North Carolina. She did quite a bit there. Before we go into, there's not a lot of things to answer on the thing, so let's go ahead and talk about, first of all, right now, all these people are trying to say, go back to work. Fox News is spending a whole lot of time telling you that it's time for you to go back to work. So if you are a listener, a conservative listener, if you are somebody that just picked up the podcast on iHeartRadio, or you picked up the podcast on or if you pick up the podcast on any one of these places, Stitcher or iTunes or TuneIn or whatever, and you're conservative, and you've been told for a long time, this stuff is not real. Just go back to work. That's all you need to do. Let me just tell you. If you believe that, if they believe what they're telling you and they just don't think of you as a peon, in other words, you go out and work, you go out and face the potential of dying. Do you think they're doing the same thing? Check this out. Big corporations like Fox News are making calculations and finding that now is not the time to let people go back into the office en masse. This fits into a pattern we've been seeing since the winter. Corporate America has been a step or two ahead of the government. As one of Fox News said to me, we were originally told of a potential return to the office in mid-May back in late March, so I wouldn't be surprised if we don't make it until June 15. And in effect, they sent out a notice to Fox News employees that says, hey guys, don't come into the office. Maybe we will do this in June. But guess what? Fox News is not doing that, right? Fox News is out there telling Americans, hey guys, you need to go out there and work. In other words, they understand. They understand the classist nature of America. You work, you go do things. But those of us who have the privilege to be working for Fox News, the privilege to have higher end jobs, the privilege to be in corporate America, the privilege to be executives, we don't have to follow that. We don't. It's important for us to see this. And you know, with all today, we had another 3 million people that were laid off. Well, 3 million people that filed for unemployment. This is now 16.2 million people that are added to. We ain't got no insurance now, no health insurance. So here we are with with a pandemic. People losing their jobs because everybody's jobs are attached to their employment, which is a silly thing. You get to notice that, oh my God, if my job is attached to my employment, that's a problem, right? Because if I lose my job, I have no insurance. Why have that? Why have that? Well, anyhow, we have an article out here. It says we need single payer like yesterday. Medicare for all case made as 16.2 million lose employer-tied insurance. In just 2 weeks, the number of Americans estimated to have lost their health insurance as a result of the coronavirus pandemic grew by nearly 4 million, according to the Economic Policy Institute. EPI estimates that 16.2 million workers overall have lost the insurance they carried through their employer since March, when the coronavirus forced industry across the country to shut down, laying off and furloughing tens of millions. The think tank previously estimated in research published at the end of April, 12.7 million people had lost their employer-based insurance. Thursday's estimate number comes on the same day the Department of Labor announced that another 3 million Americans lost their jobs in the last 2 weeks, bringing the total number of unemployed workers since March to at least 36 million. They want you back to work. And here's the deal. I think Americans can make a deal. And if you've heard the program before, you've heard me say, let's make a deal. Let's go ahead and say, yeah, we'll go back to work. Just make it safe. Where we need PPEs, give us PPEs. Where we need distance separation, social distancing, we'll do social distancing. You want to open these things, fine. But as the doctor showed in the first piece that I played earlier today, what happens is still the virus has a way of getting in. And if the virus get in, just make sure that everybody has health insurance so they don't have to think about it. You want a vibrant economy, give folks a good social safety net. But right now, why go back to work? You go back to work, you get sick, you go bankrupt. You stay home, you stay living poor for a couple of years until this thing passes, and then you go back into the workforce. And guess what? Hey, you don't have to worry about some pandemic necessarily that's going to put you into a hospital where you are permanently bankrupted for the rest of your life. You see, just like plutocrats make calculations as far as what to do, every American citizen should do the same. Yesterday, I had a friend on the air who said, oh, they're glad that they're opening back up to go back to work. You know, she worked in the beauty industry, and yes, her people don't get a check from the government because of this pandemic, and they need to be able to take care of their kids, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is the time where I say we have to come together and support each other, because you know what? By them going back to work, they're easing the urgency of government to work, to do what they're supposed to do. And if they reduce the urgency that government has, it takes us that much more time to get a real social safety net. But in the interim, those heroes who go out there to work, in the interim, that's what they are. Those heroes who are going out there to work in the interim, they're going to get sick. And those who get sick, the ones who coronavirus, some people get coronavirus and it does nothing to them. But for those who are susceptible to the illnesses that's caused by this virus, when they go into that hospital, the rest of their lives is forever changed. They will be officially poor going forward. It would have changed their economy forever. Cobra is not an answer. Cobra is not an answer because most jobs don't have insurance that forwards you Cobra. And you see, that is the thing. Even the new bill that they passed, Nancy Pelosi just put out a bill there, and instead of just saying we're going to blanket everybody with health insurance, even if it's just blanketing folks for health insurance for 2 years as we mitigate coronavirus, she said, no, let's give it through Cobra. So if you give it through Cobra, what happens? Well, if you had a job that afforded you insurance, Cobra will pay. Well, the help that she's given you says, okay, we will pay your Cobra for you so you will remain insured. But if you worked at a restaurant where you had no insurance, you're in trouble. Why go back to work? You were getting tips. You couldn't afford Obamacare, so you just winged it. But since more than likely you just have gotten the flu or gotten the cold, which would have made you okay, it's no big deal. But as it turns out, no, that's not where we're at. Folks, we are constantly working not for you. As I showed you with the article there with with Fox News, they're telling you to go back to work. They want you to go back to work. But they're giving you no guarantees. You give them guarantee that you're going to continue to make some money for them, but they are not going to do anything to tell you. They are going to make your life easier. And that is a problem that we have today. And that is a problem when I talk about us having to work together. We have a system. And we have a failed economic system. And I'm not going to go into a lot of details because I don't have the amount of time necessary to go into the specific detail here. But what I want to say is this. We were indoctrinated into a system that says if you have the money that you can pay an engineer to design something for you, that you can pay somebody to clean up behind you, that you can pay for all these things because you were afforded the capital, the monies. That somehow the only one that matters is you, right? Let's just take the engineer. And the reason I always talk about engineers, I'm an engineer, so I have that's my thing, right? I've designed a whole lot of stuff in several companies, and when it's time to lay off, you always notice that. Luckily for me, interesting, I've never gotten laid off, right? I've always been ahead of the curve. When I see layoffs on one business, I run to the other company. I mean, I've worked in the 5 years that I worked in the private sector before I formed my own company. Every time I saw a layoff, I got scared and run. My thought process was always, several strikes on me. I'm not going to stay here to wait for them to say, okay, we're letting you go. I would always run and get me another job. So I worked for 5 different companies: NL Industries, Ford Aerospace, NL McCullough, Lockheed, Planning Research Corporation, and Dresser Atlas. A lot of companies, right? I stayed at some 9 months. And when you work in the oil industry, it was touching those days. You look at the rig count and you see the rig count going down and you say, I guess it's about time to disappear. And then you go into another industry. So I went from oil monitoring to then monitoring gas lines and then to NASA. But the thing that irked me the most was we developed products, man. But the only persons that matter were those people who took care of the financial interests. Everybody else were just cogs in the wheel. The engineer, the secretary, the janitor, all the people that made things happen. They were subservient to people pushing paper. They were subservient to people who couldn't even do the things that you could. The oil company that drills and hire physicists who understands the rock structures. The executives knew nothing about that. But yet they profited most from your intellect. Why is that right? The janitor who kept the place clean so that you could absolutely get in. Why are they afforded more? Why are the executives afforded that much more than them? It is because of the way we think. That person who went to business school compared to that person who went to engineering, doctoring, medical, or whatever, what made them, the executives in business school, worth more than the others? You know what made it worth more? The design of our economic system from slavery. The slaves toiled the land. The slaves made the cotton gin. The slaves made things happen. The slaves executed. The masters sat and drank tea and had cigars, and that's what they did, but they had the capital, right? So that even capitalism, the way it was broken down, the way it had the people at the top and who makes the most, it's no different than the structure that we had during slavery. You are not merited what you're worth. And until we start teaching the system, until we start showing people their worth, until we start telling that janitor, we could not exist without you. That garbage man, we could not exist without you. That plumber, we could not exist without you. It's a family, it's a social construct. Until we start telling and instructing people of that and having them believe those realities, I don't know where we're going. We are going to continue repeating the same things over and over again and having those least able to serve be the ones who work on you, who make on you. And that is one of the goals I hope that we all attain and we all empower ourselves about. That we are more than just those people that are there pushing paper. So that is important, my brothers and sisters. That is important. Anyhow, we're coming to the end of the show. And you know what I'm going to tell you. We need your support. Please go to store.politicsdoneright.com. Store.politicsdoneright.com. Please support our show. Store.politicsdoneright.com. Go get a cup. Go get a t-shirt. Get our book, As I See It, Class Warfare, the Only Resort to Right-Wing Doom. Please go ahead and visit our page that allows you to become a subscriber to the program. You want to really be able to start changing the framework, the way we think. You want to really have people empowered. We have to have programs that tell not only the truth, but tell it within the narrative that matters, the narrative that speaks to people's hearts, people's brains, and people's worth. If you want to do that, you want to be a part of that, please subscribe to our program. Patreon.com/politicsdoneright. That is patreon.com/politicsdoneright. Again, that is patreon.com/politicsdoneright. Alternatively, you can subscribe or you can contribute by going to paypal.me/politicsdoneright. That is paypal.me/politicsdoneright. And of course, again, to our store.politicsdoneright.com. The only way we are going to make a difference is if we make the change ourselves, if we empower ourselves. These elections that are coming up is going to be testy. I want to show you something that I wrote upon as well. If you take a look at the polls, right? All of us think Trump is so crazy. Oh, he's doing all these bad things. But guess who? It still shows that he could win. Losing the popular vote big and still win. You see, he has a hell of a team running his social media. He has a hell of a team doing the calculations. And they are going to do just what they need to do to pull out a win if they can. And they will if we don't empower people. There are several people that need empowering right now. The young people have to see a reason to vote. If right now they see no health care, no school forgiveness, no tuition free, why spend the time to choose between one of these guys when the other one, instead of doing something for us, is playing the same ball of protecting corporate America? You know, if we really want change, come out with a real progressive agenda and not only campaign in the barrios, the ghettos, but go to Appalachia, those places that Trump think he has won. And with this coronavirus decimating areas, go in there and start to tell them, this is what we're going to do for you. And you know what? It will work. The problem why a lot of neoliberals and others won't do it is because they are scared of the avalanche. The avalanche that will occur when people realize they've sold themselves short. When people realize that they've sold themselves so short and start to demand what's theirs. And remember, with neoliberals and Republicans, there's a left track and the right track. But the one thing's, when you have the train tracks, right? You have the left track and the right track. The one thing about those tracks is they're both going in the same direction with just one of the right bias, one of the left bias. Let's not fall into the trap. Let's get it done. My name is Egberto Willies. This is Politics Done Right. And you know how I end this baby. I am what? Out! I'm Egberto Willies, host of Politics Done Right, an independent news program. I post several news videos of interest every day. I ask you so kindly to subscribe to my channel and please leave me some comments. Thank you very much.